that. That'd be good.
Sure.
Thank you. Try to get around this large tree. If I can. Hi, Sheila.
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay. We're still setting up a little bit, but we're doing good.
You're very cut off.
That's good.
Tilt it instead, if you don't mind. Just tilt it a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. How?
Better.
What, yeah,
Much
but what?
better.
Yeah, but what about you? Can you see Can you see the corner of that chair?
No, because the thing in the middle, you know, I can't see it because it's in the
Okay,
thing is
well,
in
have a
the way.
seat and I'll check and make sure you're still in there.
Okay.
You seem to be fine.
Why don't we just look at it on Facebook and see?
I'll check it. I'm trying right now.
Okay.
If you're just joining us, welcome. Where does this go? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so welcome. We're glad you're here. We're going to be talking about Christmassy stuff. I'll start us off with a little short presentation on is December 25th the real day Jesus was born, because there's a lot of misinformation about that, and I thought you might want to have some real scholarship there, as opposed to what passes for scholarship. Let me see if my head is
Oops.
framed right on Facebook for these
Well,
folk.
let's see this first. Yeah. Okay.
This is for scholarship.
Seems okay.
Yeah, that seems okay. Boy, that light is really harsh on my face.
Um,
Looks great on you. You look all buttery creamy. I look splotchy because I got all these sunspots. Okay. That's what I get for not using enough sunscreen, right, Sheila?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
First I've heard that one, buttery creamy. I like it.
Oh, I got so many things to close here. I wish I closed them earlier. Okay, that looks good. That's not bad. Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay. Now I can go to Zoom. And there's our little thing. Yay! Can you see the PowerPoint there, Sheila?
Yep. I sure can.
Great. Great. We got other people showing up on Facebook now. It's almost that time, isn't it? So
Yes,
let me
it
see
is.
where I have to hold this so that it looks correct on Facebook. Where's a good spot? Oh, that's plenty close. Yeah, that's plenty close, isn't it? But it's covering.
Yeah.
It's kind of covering me up for PowerPoint. So maybe if I put it here to the right a little bit, maybe they can still see it. Yes. I'll just put it right there so they can still see me see my face at least. Be covering up Patricia, but there you go. I don't, there's only so much I can fix at the same time. You okay?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Excellente.
I'm all done with my physical therapy on my hip.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Was that hard?
At first, yes, it was.
Wow.
It hurt. It hurt really bad.
I bet it did.
It did, but I lived through all that. Now, the 7th of this month, I go and see the orthopedic doctor. Oh, train coming. Hold on.
I hear your train. Well, we have Ann May here from all the way from Bentonia. If she still lives in that same horse farm she had out there all those years ago. And that was so long ago now. I mean, I can hardly believe, you know, sometimes I can't believe all the time that has passed. You look the same though. You're doing something right. I guess it's all that fresh air and all those horses. I just sent you a reply. I hope you get it.
I think I saw Ralph and Elaine earlier.
Yeah, and I've seen other people coming and going back and forth, so we'll see which way they go, whether they go to Zoom or whether they go to the Facebook. You know, we put it on YouTube as well, so I'll be putting it on YouTube later, and we'll have a link on YouTube to just go to Bert Gary, lowercase, BERTGARY, and that's the name of my channel, and you'll see my face, so there won't be any question about, you know, what it is. And otherwise, you can watch the recording on the wall of the Owl Rock group, or you can watch it on Zoom live. We don't record it on Zoom typically. We're not using those recordings. We're using this instead. You know, we've worked on a lot of technical difficulties, and this is just sort of the best we can do right now until somebody tells me something smarter. We've got good speakers. We got a good mic. We got beautiful Patricia. So we're, you know,
Buttery and creamy.
a couple of buttery and creamy Patricia, and then we got 2 laptops and 2 phones. And a bottle of Sprite. What else do we need?
We got Jesus, and that's all we need. I think
Yep.
we're good. We got Dale and Kia joined us, and Sheila's here, and Anne May, and so I think we're good to go.
let's go ahead and go. So.
Welcome, y'all.
Some people have asked the question from time to time in my ministry, why do we celebrate on December the 25th? And whenever I'm in a group, I usually get 2 or 3 different answers. One is that is probably the day he was born, because that's what tradition says. And then sometimes I get another answer or 2 around no one knows. They just say no one knows, it was just a guess, but they don't know why. But the ones who went to college tend to say this: oh, you know, they just ripped off a Roman holiday. You know, Sol Invictus, the consecration of the sun. It was the vernal equinox, and the pagans, you know, worshiped the sun as a god. I'm like, oh, okay. So let's find out if either any of those are true, or maybe the real truth is really simpler than that. All right. So I want you to look at the Thank You History Channel. If you want to learn anything about history, do not go
to the History
do
Channel.
not go to the History Channel. They're good on Bigfoot and UFOs. That's about it. Okay, so here's what they wrote, so you can kind of see what we're up against here. I can't see it yet. I can't see it. I can't
think
see
you
it.
still have it on. Okay.
I
hold on.
can't see it. There we go. Okay, so this is the History Channel website, and I'm going to give you the websites tonight whenever I can, so you can look it up for yourself. Hello, Dale. Salute to you, sir. All the way from Tennessee, up there somewhere north of Chattanooga in the hills. So the History Channel website reads, "But was Jesus really born on December 25th in the first place?" Now, that doesn't sound like scholarship to me. That sounds like high school writing. Okay, but was Jesus really born in the first? Why is the phrase "in the first place" necessary? This is not scholarly writing. This is high school level writing. Okay, so that's a clue something's wrong, and then probably not. A scholarly paper would never write something like that. It would just describe the facts as research has found, and then they'd put a nice footnote. By the way, these sites that you look up, they don't do footnotes. They're not scholars, and they're not telling you where they get their stuff from. So that's a waste of time, and I'll show you that a little bit more too. So they continue to write here. The Bible doesn't mention his exact birthday, that is Jesus' birthday, and the nativity story contains conflicting clues. Well, let me ask you a question. This is just a logical question, okay? If the nativity story, which is in the Bible, doesn't mention Jesus' actual birthday, how can there be conflicting clues if there aren't any clues? People don't think about this stuff when they read it. They just parrot whatever they hear online. Just look at that. I mean, it's a simple deductive, you just use deductive reasoning, okay? If the Bible doesn't mention it, the nativity story, when Jesus' exact birthday is, how can it give conflicting clues? And that's another hint. There is an anti-Christian bias in scholarly work sometimes, and more often online. There's a real anti-Christian bias out there, and whenever they can do something to make Christians look silly, they enjoy doing it. It's fun for them. They're like trolls going around looking for Christians to offend. So don't get caught up in that, because they don't know anything either. They're just parroting what they heard from their professor, who is quoting a book that he can't remember if he ever looked it up at all. I'll show you the book he got his information from, and it's completely wrong. Okay, here we go. For instance, the presence of shepherds and their sheep suggests a spring birth. That actually is true. I did a good bit of research on this, and the suggestion is that the sheep were allowed to go into agricultural fields in Old and New Testament times in the Middle East. And the reason they were allowed to go into the fields, and it specifically says in Luke's gospel, the fields. The sheep were in the fields, not in the wilderness, not in the woods. They were in the fields. They're eating the stubble from the spring harvest. So it could be that Jesus was born in like May or something. But we don't know the date. Now, History Channel, we got to pray for the History Channel. History Channel website says when the church officials settled on the 25th at the end of the 3rd century. Now, it sounds like they had a meeting. They didn't have a meeting. They didn't decide on it, okay? I'll show you that in a minute. They likely wanted the date to coincide with existing pagan festivals honoring Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture, and Mithra, the Persian god of light. That way, it became easier to convince Rome's pagans subjects to accept Christianity as the empire's official religion. When they settled on, okay, the other phrase I want you to note is right here, where it says, they likely wanted the date to coincide. They likely wanted the date scholars don't write like that. They give you evidence, and there isn't any. Okay, when they say early Christians likely wanted the date to coincide with an existing pagan festival, there is no written Christian records that say that. They say something very different and has nothing to do with pagan festivals. You follow me? Got to be careful when you read this stuff online. I must say, though, Wikipedia fixed their article. They put the old theory, but they put the other theory in. At least they knew. At least they knew about the other theory, right? And Wikipedia did a better job than the History Channel for sure. Okay, so here's where the theory comes from. The theory of the Christians stealing, the pagan date, December the 25th, for their Sol Invictus and the Saturnalia and Mithra and all that stuff. That comes from this book, all right? 1890. This theory comes from 1890. That means 1800 years after the birth of Jesus. And this is a long time later by a scholar named James George Fraser, and he is an anthropologist. He's not a historian. He's not a biblical scholar. He's not a church historian. And so far as I can tell in the footnotes from the book, he didn't look at anything that I'm about to show you. But here's what he said. He said that, by the way, these are my words, okay? These are my summaries. These are his words in red. The most popular theory for December 25th, touted by laypersons and scholars alike, is that Christians borrowed the time frame, if not the date, of the popular pagan Saturnalia festival during the winter solstice. Paired with this borrowing is the Roman festival of the birth of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, on December 25th. And Fraser wrote, the church seems, and no footnote, right? No footnote. The church seems to have borrowed December 25th directly from its heathen rival. What's the evidence for that? He offers none, except for the fact that there are some coincidences around the festival time of date and some of the practices that were going on in both. But the practice of giving gifts and stuff like that in Christianity didn't come till much later, maybe after the 9th century. So the fact that they gave gifts during the Roman era would have been irrelevant to them, and they wouldn't have even known. So his arguments are full of holes, and he says seems to. That's always a red flag, and that's why I wrote it in red. Now, following up, I wrote this. The problem with this theory, though it sounds oh so convincing, is that no Christian writings from the time support it, meaning that it's entirely conjecture on Fraser's part, but that does not stop professors and encyclopedias from writing this explanation as fact. Let me show you what a real scholar looks like. He looks like this guy. They always have those funny glasses, and their hair is always too long, and they wear these bulky sweaters, and they look really smart like they sit around reading books all day. Well, this is Andrew. He's an actual historian who uses actual footnotes. This is Andrew McGowan. He's Dean and President of Berkeley Divinity School at Yale and McFadden Professor of Anglican Studies at Yale Divinity School. Formerly, he was Warden and president of Trinity College at the University of Melbourne, and Joan Munro, professor of historical theology at Trinity's Theology School within the University of Divinity. This guy's a brilliant guy, and he did actual research, and I read his stuff. And he's good, and he has footnotes. Okay?
Yeah.
He tells me what the historical source is so that I can read them for myself. That's what you want. So what did he say? He said that, these are my words, I'm just summarizing him. Well, let me see. Did I copy anything of his here? No, these are my words summarizing what he said. There is no identification in the biblical record or in any written record before 200 AD of proposed dates for Jesus' birth. And this is really interesting. The early Christians, all the way up to around 200 AD, they didn't celebrate birthdays in the Middle East. They considered that a Roman holiday, and that was not the practice for 200 years after Jesus was born. So it would have not been it would have been strange to know what day he was born. Nobody celebrated their birthday, right? So the Christian father Origen of Alexandria in the 2nd century mocked Roman celebrations of birthdays as a thoroughly pagan practice, suggesting that Christians for 200 years may have shied away from speculation about a birth anniversary for Jesus, seeing it as a violation of their religious sensibilities. Now, while there is some conjecture involved there, and that's why I wrote speculation, it is true that Origen said he considered the Roman celebrations thoroughly pagan, and he's one of the primary writers, Christian writers, in the 2nd century. That's in the 100s AD. That's before 200 AD. So what happened around 200 AD? Something changed. So at 200 AD, in the earliest known writings that mention Jesus' possible birthday, Clement of Alexandria mentions 5 dates. Actual author from the time frame mentioning dates for the birth of Jesus. You'd think that would come up in the other book by Fraser. No. Okay? Adjusting to our modern calendar, Clement says that different Christian groups selected different dates, those being March 21, April 15, April 20, April 21, and May 20. He made no mention of December 25th. Note that only May 20 is close to June, the time when shepherds would have been allowed to graze their sheep in the stubble of agricultural fields. Of course, it could have started, depending on the climate that year, it could have started in, they could do the harvest at different times depending on the ripeness and when it actually happens, depending on things like climate, rain, sunshine, temperature. But as early as April, sure, maybe not as early as March, but in April or May or early June would be the time when the shepherds would be doing that in the fields. And that's what Luke specifically says, if we can trust Luke to know what he's talking about, and usually he does, as I've noted. Now, in the 300s AD, this is interesting. By the 4th century, that's the 300s, 2 dates emerged, and they are still celebrated worldwide today. There are a few other dates, but the main 2, okay? Most Christian churches commemorate the birth of Jesus on December 25th. Some groups, typically in the East, celebrate on January 6th. A few celebrate on January 7th or 19th, depending on the calendars they use and how they calculate the date moving from one calendar to another. So here's what Andrew McGowan says, and these are his quotes. He wrote around 200 CE. That's a scholarly abbreviation for AD. It means Common Era. AD means Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, I believe. Around 200 AD, Tertullian of Carthage reported the calculation that the 14th of Nisan, the day of the crucifixion according to the Gospel of John, in the year Jesus died, was equivalent to March 25th on the Roman solar calendar. March 25th is, of course, 9 months before December 25th. It was later recognized as the Feast of Annunciation, the commemoration of Jesus' conception. Thus, Jesus was believed to have been conceived and crucified on the same day of the year. Exactly 9 months later, Jesus was born on December 25th. He's simply saying that here's evidence from Tertullian in around 200 AD, written down so that we can read it, and the footnotes are in blue, that he wrote that they used December 25th because it was exactly 9 months to the day after the day he was crucified, and they thought, well, since he was born to die for the sins of the world, that was the purpose of his life, that was also the purpose of his conception. So it just made theological sense. Not factual sense, but theological sense. We need a day to celebrate Jesus' birth. How about 9 months after the day he died? And that way we can think of his conception as being on the day that he was crucified. Do you understand?
No.
Okay.
No.
What's 9 months before December 25th?
March 25th.
Right. And what date did they celebrate Jesus' crucifixion? March 25th.
Mm-hmm.
So, if he was conceived on the day that he was crucified, the same date, that's a theological way of saying he was born to die for the sins of the world. He was conceived to die for the sins of the world. They picked the date because it was 9 months after his crucifixion.
Okay.
It was a theological decision for the church to say something theological. They picked it for its meaning, not because it was factually true.
Gotcha.
And they never said that they believed it was factually true. In fact, you'll see a quote in just a minute that says that it was considered a tradition. Here's another quote from Andrew. This idea appears in an anonymous Christian treatise titled On Solstices and Equinoxes, which appears to come from the 4th century North Africa. The treatise states, therefore our Lord was conceived on the 8th of the calends of April in the month of March, that is March 25th, which is the day of the passion of the Lord and of his conception. For on that day he was conceived on the same as he suffered. On the same he suffered. There's a footnote. You can actually read this. It's from around 400 AD. Based on this, the treatise dates Jesus' birth to the winter solstice. Again, let me say it again. They picked December 25th because it's exactly 9 months to the day after he was crucified. And they are seeing meaning in that he was conceived for the purpose of dying. So he was conceived on the day that he died, and he was born 9 months later. Get it? Now here is the piece de resistance. I don't know French. Okay? Augustine. Probably the most well-known church father and Christian writer who lived around 400 AD. He was familiar with this dating, this association, and he wrote about it in his book on the Trinity. He wrote, for he, Jesus, is believed to have been conceived. Hear the word? Believed. All right? He was believed to have been conceived on the 25th of March, upon which day he also suffered. So the womb of the virgin in which he was conceived, now listen to him theologize here. The womb of the virgin in which he was conceived, where no one of mortals was begotten, corresponds to the new grave in which he was buried, wherein was never man laid, neither before him nor since. But he was born according to tradition. These are Augustine's words with a footnote. According to tradition upon December the 25th. So what I'm telling you is that the church historians, at least from 3 sources, separate, independent sources from generally the same time frame and very early, from between 200 and 400 AD, they all said it's a tradition that we celebrated on December 25th because we saw a theological connection to March 25th, the day he died. Let's consider that also the day he was conceived. And the womb in which no child had been born, had been before, corresponded or was a type of or a theological touchstone to the tomb in which no one had ever been laid. See?
Yeah.
See, he's got a sermon going here. This is not about him telling us that what factually happened this way. It is about him telling us this is tradition. The earliest church fathers said this is why the church settled on these dates. Because of their meaning. It's easy to remember, and they needed a date, and they didn't have one. What was the date likely? I mean, if we had to guess, we'd have to say, May. In terms of his birth. But in terms of theology and in terms of the historical church And what they believed in terms of their traditions and why they decided this, it's because he died on March 25th, they believed. And therefore 9 months later, that's the day they celebrate his birthday. December 25th. Do you follow?
Yeah.
You follow now?
Yes.
All right. So look what the free encyclopedia online does with this. I gave you the web address right there. Okay. Listen to how they put it. Some early Christian thinkers, no footnote, no explanation of who these early Christian thinkers were. This is the way people write when they didn't do any research and when they're lazy or they're kids, you know, college kids who don't know better. All right. Some early Christian thinkers offered other more convoluted explanations for the choice of December 26th. This free encyclopedia said it was definitely the Roman holiday. It was definitely Sol Invictus. The Christians just robbed it. They just stole it. They just picked his birthday for December 25th because it was already a pagan holiday, and they adopted it. All right. And then they say, yeah, but some early Christian thinkers. Well, how about Origen and Clement and Augustine? Maybe we could go there if we'd done any reading, which they didn't. And they called it convoluted. Well, why is it convoluted? That's a pejorative. What could early Christian thinkers have done but just do things that are convoluted? Because they made all this stuff up anyway. There are a lot of people who don't think anything in the Bible is true and don't trust it. And they love to make fun of Christians and poke at them, so convoluted thinking is an insult. It's not information, it's an insult. Okay? This is what they do. Continuing here. According to one scholar, which scholar? You see a footnote? According to one scholar, church leaders tried to figure out the date of Jesus' birth from the date traditionally given for his death, March 25th. Since they wanted to come up with a round number for Jesus' age at death, they assumed he was also conceived on March 25th. He makes it sound like they had a meeting, they were trying to make something up, they're fakes, they're pretending, it's all lies anyway, so what else can we expect from Christians? This is insulting and non-scholarly. And it's an encyclopedia online. Now, what happens is the popular culture picks up on this, and you see articles from newspapers and magazines. Look what Good Housekeeping did. I love this. Okay, so the title of the article was 35 Interesting Christian Facts to Impress Your Friends and Family. This was published November 8th, 2021. This is brand new.
Oh.
They wrote, while Christmas celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ, the actual date is lost to history. That's true. There is no mention of December 25th in the Bible. That's true. And many historians, where's the footnote? Which historians? Okay? Many historians say Jesus was really born in the spring. Could be. Reasonable guess. Shepherds have the flocks in the fields, eating the stubble. Some historians, here we go again, many historians and now some historians posit the date was originally chosen because it coincided with the pagan festival of Saturnalia, which honored the agricultural god Saturn. So now they've given you ammunition to go to your Christmas dinner and tell Granny that, oh no, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. The early Christians robbed the date from the pagan god of Saturn. You know, thus ruining Christmas dinner, which is what they want. Thank you, Good Housekeeping. All right, I'm done. But I just wanted you to know that if you want to do real research on this, you have now a decent scholar, you have some basic information, you know where to find the footnotes, right? And you know where his article is. And I could also, by the way, that article that I took the quote from for the scholar, what's his name?
McGowan.
Yeah, McGowan. The article was in Biblical Archaeology Review magazine, which is a publication of the Biblical Archaeology Society. And that's semi-reputable. I mean, that's a good source. I used it a lot when I was first learning about the Holy Land and teaching over in Israel. It has some screwball stuff in it too, but I mean, sometimes it has great stuff. So there we are. Now you can close the PowerPoint and we can talk. Now, if somebody's microphone is on and I can hear loud talking or noise in the background. So if you'll mute your mic until you're ready to talk, that would help everybody, I think. You're closing it?
Yeah, well, I just want to refer to one thing though before we close it. So even though...
That should be 25th, not 26th.
Yeah, I thought so. But even though Free Encyclopedia came up with it, it seems to be correct though in terms of the date. They don't have footnotes, and they just use according to one scholar, which is correct. But they still came up with the same date though, March 25th, as
they read something about that theory, and they represented it in its barest bones. So, yeah, most of the article talks about the Saturnalia thing, but they gave homage to the fact that there are some scholars or one scholar or whatever that they don't name and they don't footnote. Yeah,
it's like copying someone else's
research, I mean,
but not giving them credit.
There's
for
stuff online like this that are actual encyclopedia articles that would not get a D from me as their professor.
And Good Housekeeping, I'm surprised that this magazine.
Good Housekeeping. No, well, see, that's the thing. I think that a lot of people who read Good Housekeeping, like my mom did all those years and had stacks of back issues, that was sort of a staple back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It was really helpful back in the time when there were mostly housewives at home who were looking for a way to keep their home. And so women trusted it as a source of literature. They had synopsises of books, and you didn't have to read the whole thing. And they had information on how to cook and recipes, and they had inspiring articles about celebrities or presidents, and they had all kinds of good stuff in there. But it's not scholarship. This is tabloid.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm surprised that they even wrote about it. I would not think to find this in Good Housekeeping at all.
Well,
like
when people get ready for Christmas, you want to give them quote unquote facts. By the way, there aren't any facts down here much, and they certainly aren't footnoted or corroborated.
Yeah.
But they give you facts so that you'll be smarter than the people around the table. And you know how you can be smarter than everybody around the table? Do actual research. Don't read Good Housekeeping and trust them to tell you about anything in the ancient world. Okay, just a word of advice. Check your sources. It's really important to do that.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, so you can close.
Mm-hmm. Stop sharing.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, hey to everybody over there on Facebook, and hello Sheila, and hello Kia. We're glad to have you on Zoom.
I think we lost Dale somehow.
Yeah, we lost Dale at some point, but Gene can't be here. He's been sitting in the woods trying to shoot living creatures. He's on vacation. He went hunting. He went hunting. He went hunting. He said, "I'm gonna go kill some creatures."
Good for Gene.
I'm gonna introduce me a bear to Jesus. Anyway, he's gonna kill me when he hears me do that to him.
Oh, Lord.
We've been struggling with Jane's voice too. It's so low, and it comes out of these speakers, and it's just like
muffled.
It comes out kind of boomy, and it's hard to understand him. But we're working on the treble and bass problem on the speakers. We got it pointed away now, and it seemed to improve it a little bit. Also, when he used his lapel mic, it was better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think, Kia? Have you heard most of this? Did you come in time to hear most of it?
I was here to listen, and you spoke on this before at church.
Right.
So I do recall hearing this before. What I found interesting, though, is that even though there are no footnotes, and however they collected their data, it does simulate some of the factual information that even the Professor McGowan collected and spoke about, minus the footnote. But it's still the same same information, some of the same information, along with some fabricated falsehoods, but nonetheless, some of the information is still in there.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think, Kia, that wasn't true 20 years ago. All you saw was the Saturnalia stuff. You didn't see any homage at all to the church historians who wrote specifically about this. Everybody just sort of ran straight to the Fraser book, you know, and from 1890, and it was used in classrooms unchallenged for decades. And then I don't know what it was. It might have been the fact that Biblical Archaeology Society and ASOR and a lot of other scholarly organizations began working with Hebrew University and a lot of other places that began to do scholarship that began to filter into the things that I taught and that Peter taught and that Charles taught and that a lot of others of us taught over in Israel. And then we were all started writing about it. And then, of course, Biblical Archaeology Review had articles and comments and stuff from us in it. And I like to think that we participated in pushing forward, including this issue of December 25th. Because when that article came out some 20 years ago in Biblical Archaeology Review, it was an explosion of interest. And when it starts to filter into some of the pastor's sermons, and then it starts to filter into books and Sunday school literature. And once you start getting that information out there, finally when someone goes to write something about this for an encyclopedia or for Good Housekeeping or whatever, and they look it up, even now on Wikipedia you can find the stuff that we were talking about 20 years ago. Instead of what Fraser did almost exclusively. So I celebrate that my colleagues and I and some of the scholars who have helped us and worked with us have made it possible for things like this to actually be in your hands now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been hearing for years and years from I was a teenager that Jesus was not born on the 25th.
Yeah.
But then no one could prove, so to speak, you know. But you would hear that a lot, and I think a lot of them would be found out there on Wikipedia and other places, other sources that you've named, and others. People just copy what someone else has said.
Yeah.
It sounds good, and they do the same thing with preaching. You know, you hear a good sermon, and then you sounds like gospel, and I'm going to use that, or I'm going to copy that, and there's no research done. I think that happens a lot in Christendom, particularly with dates, because most people are not going to take the time to research.
No.
You know, the date. They would believe that, but then there's nothing to back it up. Where did you get your source? I mean, I remember studying Augustine in seminary, and still have his book in there, and just
Confessions.
Yeah, and as he talked about, you know, the date, it just came back to me about what he said. So,
Yeah. So I mean, Augustine is an important church father. He's created a lot of the theological problems we have today in some areas, but he also was quite important in that in his Confessions he wrote unusually honestly about his own struggles with his libido and his love life and the fact that he was a priest and how difficult it was for him to come to terms with his humanness and there. I mean, that is kind of remarkable for something that's going on in 400 AD. You know, it sounded pretty introspective and honest to me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that very much about him. There's some other things about him that I could do a couple of lectures on that I have problems with, especially the way that he talked about suicide. You know, that if you commit suicide, you go directly hell. You have no grace. But that's not Bible. That's Augustine, unfortunately, as I recall.
But you'd be amazed of how many have caught on to that and have used that same belief system that he had.
Modern Pentecostals and Baptists, and to some degree other denominations too, like Methodists, have don't realize the extent to which Roman Catholicism has and its scholars have influenced our theology as much, if not in some cases more than Scripture, and we don't know the difference.
Yeah.
That angelology stuff, yeah. So I'm happy, Kia, that you've got a handle on this stuff, but I don't think 20 years ago any of the resources I looked up, there was of course no internet back then, but 20 years, not much anyway. Most of the sources that you look at back then were pretty divided, and so that church people were kind of, we don't know what day Jesus was born, but we go with the tradition, and then scholarly people who scoff at all things Christian, all things faith, all things theology. It's like, no, just like everything else, it's a lie. They got together and put together a lie, and because that's what religion does. And so that anti-Christian sentiment is out there. It wasn't in all universities, and it wasn't in all colleges, obviously, because some of them were Christian schools. But at the same time, even at schools like Emory, I remember reading this stuff. And they would speak, not at theology school, but in the college, they would speak about this Saturnalia thing as if it were fact.
Yeah.
The best guess we've got in a great, brilliant scholarly analysis of this is that Christians merely stole a pagan holiday.
Yeah.
Well, but I showed you 3 quotes from the second and the second through the 4th century, where they all said the same thing, independently of one another. One in Egypt. Yeah.
So why do you think, with all the research today, and I'd love to hear from Sheila too, but I mean, with all the research that we have today and the scholars that are around, why do you think December 25th has stuck? And no one has made any, well, I mean, I'm speaking generally, in terms of any great, had gone to any great lengths to change the date or to say, no, it's spring, it can be March or May.
Yeah, well, there's just no, I guess because there's just no point. We don't have an alternative date to suggest. Plus, the tradition is that it was decided upon theologically, 9 months after the date of his crucifixion. So the date of his conception and the date of his crucifixion are the same date.
That's really interesting. I mean,
so that's why they decided upon it according to the sources from the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century. Those Christian writers that were quoted by, what's his name, McGowan from Yale. There's no point in changing it because we don't know what to change it to.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of gas. And I think, too, that's another reason why persons may have just settled, we're going to just celebrate it. We know that December 25th is not the correct date, but we're going to celebrate his birth anyway. And that's just the best time to do it, since we're going to just continue to follow history, what everyone else has been doing before us.
Well, what if he were actually born on something like, May 19th? Okay, so that would be really weird on the Christian calendar. You would go from Easter to Christmas a month or 2 later.
Yeah.
Like.
I know. Yeah.
It'd be weird.
It would be.
It's kind of convenient for it to be.
And then
later
sometimes
in the
it
year.
might fall on the same day. Easter changes. The day changes.
Oh, of course.
What if it fell on the same day? Christmas and Easter. Oh, wow.
That would be weird.
It would be. Sheila, what are you thinking about all this?
Well, sitting here thinking about a date. I guess even if he was born, let's say in March, April, May, whatever, and the pagans decided that December 25th looked good on the calendar, what difference does it really make? I mean, I could be wrong, but what difference does it make when Jesus was born? We know he was.
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, it doesn't make any difference which day it was. The only difference that it makes is that there is a reason why it was picked by the early church, and that has been ignored by scholarship and replaced with a bogus idea from a book in 1890. And it's been passed off, that theory has been passed off as plausible, whereas the other account is actually in the history of the writings from the time, saying why they picked that date and that it's coincidental to the old Roman holiday.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that God is mad because we don't pick the right date?
Yeah, really. It's like
I mean,
it's like, hey, Earth, y'all need to get your calendar right. But you know, I mean, we know Jesus was born probably around 8 BC too. So really, what year is this? I do the math. It should be 2029 right now instead of 2021.
I know, because there's a discrepancy also about how old he was. With the 33, age 33. No, he was not at age. He was not age 33.
He was around 40, 41 probably.
You know, so I'm like you, Sheila. I mean, I don't know if it matters that much. Other than as Bert talked about in terms of just getting information wrong and scholars doing the work around it to get facts, for that purpose. I think it is important as we study these things in seminary. And then if we get it right, other things will make sense. So I think for that reason, it is important because other things in the Bible would make sense if it was on this date or it's on that date. Like shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock, that does not happen during it, when it's so cold or December, but maybe springtime. So it just makes a whole lot more sense in terms of lining up.
It messes up your hymn in the bleak midwinter.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And jingle bells dashing through the snow in May.
Exactly.
Well,
yes. So yeah. I think we just answered the question too, though, why we don't change it. Because everything will be so messed up. The songs wouldn't make sense any longer. The preaching wouldn't make sense. The nativity scene is not going to make sense anymore.
And your live Christmas trees would not last very long.
Cut your Christmas tree in March.
Just leave it up all year.
I know.
I mean, Christmas tree and all that, we all know that's pagan. I mean, that's it's just symbolic to make the holiday grander.
Yeah, I don't have a footnote handy, but from my reading, I think the first Christmas trees were in Germany, and they were hung. The trees were hung upside down from the ceiling.
Yes, in Holland also, because that's the way my grandmother hung her tree.
So you turn the tree upside down, you attach the trunk to something on the ceiling, to a roof or a beam, and so now the tree's hanging upside down from the ceiling.
What's the significance of that?
I don't know,
I've
but that's
never
what
heard
they
that.
did. That's what they did. That's what I read.
I remember asking, and all she would tell me was she was brought up that way and it stays that way.
Yeah.
Well,
They decorate those trees then, right?
Say again?
They couldn't decorate those trees then, right?
Well,
Yes,
I read that they did put candles in them, but that seems like a very dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, that sounds like cause for fire. Candles in a tree upside down?
That's what
And having all that
I
wax
read.
dripping on my carpet?
I
Are
gotta
you
check
kidding
my
me?
footnotes, but that's what I read.
I've never heard that. That's brand new for me.
Yeah, I read that some time ago, but again, I'll have to check on that. But that's not a biblical issue, so I don't really have.
Yeah.
I really haven't researched it as much. But the fact that the biblical writers who wrote about Jesus's birth and childhood, that's Matthew and Luke, that the fact that neither one of them gave a date corresponds to what Origen said in the 2nd century, in the 100s AD, about 100 years later, when he said that these Romans go around celebrating people's birthdays, a thoroughly abhorrent and practice that we as Christians just don't do.
Mm-hmm.
So that attitude was also perhaps prevalent with the Hebrew people as well, because we don't have birthdays mentioned for anybody in the Old Testament either.
No, other than Methuselah, the oldest man that ever lived, was
But
969
they gave his age, but not the
years.
date
I know,
of
the
his
birthday,
birth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so birthday, I mean, the fact that Matthew and Luke and the rest of the Bible don't care about birthdays, and the fact that Origen said in the 2nd century, in the 100s AD, yeah, this is a new thing. This is a newfangled Roman thing, and it's pagan, and we Hebrews and we Christians, we don't do this.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, it's probably not important.
So what changed in 200? What changed or was changing between the 2nd century and the 3rd century? What changed that people began to want a date? And the answer to that is simple. The gospel was spreading like wildfire through the Greco-Roman world. And as it went into this world, this is a pagan world. Okay? And they celebrate birthdays. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that the Jewish Christians or Hebrew Christians back in Jerusalem wanted to know the date Jesus was born, because Mary would have told them, I guess, that were important.
Yeah.
She was a part of the church, according to Luke. So, and more writing as well. Book of Acts, she's present in the Jerusalem church. So if it had been important, they would have written it in the Bible. If it had been important, Mary would have told them. The fact that they didn't corroborates what Origen was saying, that even as late as the 2nd century, no one cared until the gospel began to really bloom in the Roman Empire. Because by the 5th century, Christianity was the official Roman religion. It had spread that well. And it spread fast, and people were adopting it, and they celebrated birthdays. Well, what's Jesus' birthday? Mm. So they began to pick dates for various reasons, and the ones that kind of stuck were the ones that we talked about. That March 25th, December 5th, 25th connection.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff. I mean, I think all in all, I'm thinking about your question, Sheila, would Jesus be upset if we don't get the date right? And, I think the one thing that Jesus is concerned about is the scripture that talks about, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And then secondly, love your neighbor as thyself. I think on these 2 commandments hangs all of the commandments.
And don't get my birthday wrong.
All the...
Hey,
you get my birthday wrong?
I think that's all Jesus is concerned about. Loving him with all of our hearts, minds, souls, and our loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. And if we can do those 2 things, that hangs all the commandments, all the Christmas trees, all the dates that we get wrong, all the hymns that we get wrong, Christmas and Easter, by the way. On the hill far away, all the nice hymns that I love to death, and perhaps we'll keep singing. It's, I don't think it matters. I think the fact that we serve God with all of our hearts and the best to our knowledge as we know how, I think that's what's important to Jesus. I really think so.
So there's, I guess there are really 2 tasks here. One task is living the Christian life, as set forth in the scriptures and the traditions of our church, in our hymns, and in the scriptures, and in the liturgy, and in the traditions, and there's the living of the Christian life. And then there is historical research, where to the best of our abilities we look at what we can, and try to determine things. For example, when I teach over in the Holy Land, Kia, you'll be interested in this. I'm not sure I've told you this before, but I was researching on the wedding at Cana, and I found a great couple of articles in different scholarly magazines, journals, and they had an excavation that had begun by the University of Puget Sound at Cana, and I'd seen all the pictures and the layouts, and they found columbarium, which is they kept doves. It's like a dove key. It's like little holes in the wall where you keep birds, and they found wine jars, and they found everything that you would find like in a first century village. They found Cana. So how do they know that where Cana was? Cana. So when
I was wondering what you're talking about.
It's pronounced Cana.
Cana.
Cana. And so when they found Cana, they the way that they knew where it was is that Queen Helena came, in the late 4th century, and she was trying to find all the important biblical sites, and so that the realm would know where things happened. And the locals said, well, you want to go over here to visit this little town. She said, is this Cana? And they said, well, not exactly, but you can't get to where Cana was, and it's just a ruin now. No, she said, well, I want to go there. That's the real place. And they said, no, you got to go through this swamp right here. And she said, well, forget that, and we can't do that. There's no road over there. So they built modern Cana is built over is built across the highway from where the real Cana is on the other side of a marshy area. So when you go there, what you have to do, what I try to show people when they go over to the Holy Land is there are traditional sites and there are authentic sites. At the authentic site at Cana, there's no town, there's just these ruins. That's the authentic site. But on the other side of the highway, there's modern Cana built as a traditional site where Queen Helena built an original church in this, late 5th century. So you see the difference between authentic and traditional. And that's a part of the journey of doing scholarship with history. But it may or may not really have anything to do with you living out your Christian faith or practicing your Christian worship and religion and tradition. But it's a separate route in a way, but it's a route I'm interested in and a lot of people are interested in. They want to know. I mean, I have so many people tell me, thank you, Bert, for showing me that this was traditional site and that this was an authentic site. There's, and that's a part of, it's called being honest. It's about scholarship being forthcoming and transparent and honest.
Yeah, like Zacchaeus' tree that, people show, oh, this is the tree that Zacchaeus climbed in Jerusalem. And
yeah, every time I go to Jericho, there's this big sycamore tree that's in a little park on a square. And every time I go there, I see huge buses parked, and there'll be Korean people pouring out, Russian people pouring out, African people pouring out of the buses to get their picture taken with the Zacchaeus tree. And because that's what the guide told them it was. This is the tree Zacchaeus climbed in. Well, that's a local tradition, but the trees don't live that long.
So it can't be be the same tree.
It might be the same spot, but it may not be the same tree.
Well, it's the same town anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's in the vicinity of the same town.
Let's just pick a tree and just call it Zacchaeus tree. You know what I mean? What difference does it
Didn't
make?
they kind of over there in the Holy Lands just kind of think that this is where Jesus was?
Do people in the
he might have walked or might have sat down.
You mean people who live there? Of course. There are lots of different kinds of people who live there, though. There are a few Christians there. The Christian population there is dwindling. There are very few Protestants. Most of the people, most of the Palestinians, for example, who are Christians, are Greek Orthodox, but there are also some Roman Christians as well. And my friend in Bethlehem goes to the Greek Orthodox Church there in Bethlehem, which is the cave where Jesus, in tradition, says he was born, beneath a first century house. But the most of the Jewish people in Israel, by and large, are secular. They're Jewish by blood and by tradition and practice, but they are more
not religious.
Yeah, they're not religious. Yeah, depends on where you are, though. In Jerusalem, Hebrew people are Jewish people are much more common and much more religious than like in Tel Aviv, which going to Tel Aviv is like going to San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's very modern and progressive, and it's market, capitalism, business, industry. tourism, beaches, resorts, spas.
Yeah.
You know.
But a lot of the Orthodox, I mean, I think they're most prevalent. That's what I see in the robes, and they got on
Right.
the hat. And
So they don't believe
collar.
that Jesus was the Messiah, but there's no one that I've ever heard over there deny that he was once alive, or they just they think he was wrong. Now, when it comes to the Muslims, the Arabs who are Muslims, the Palestinians and Arabs who are Muslims, they also believe in Jesus as a prophet because he's in their Quran.
Right.
And so they don't have any doubt about his existence or his
Yeah.
birth, but their understanding of him is quite different. It's not based on Scripture.
It's not the Messiah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was not a rabbi either. He was not Hebrew. He's one of them. He was a Palestinian. He was of Arab descent in the Quran.
Yeah, I mean, because of the pictures too, and it looks like olive skin and hair and everything else.
Well, whether
But- who knows?
Well, the Bible says he was a rabbi. The Bible says he was of the tribe of Judah. The Bible says he was born in Bethlehem and that he was raised in Nazareth and that he died in Jerusalem and that everybody called him rabbi. And he read in Hebrew. And he preached about the Hebrew characters from the Old Testament. He's clearly not an Arab. Okay? But to the Muslims, he's an Arab.
Like we were listening on the radio the other day. Remember, and the Muslim, it was like Farrakhan
Yes, it was a
speaking,
Farrakhan thing.
and talking about the black Jesus. He didn't say black, though. He said
Yeah, he said black Jesus. He said black Jesus and Arab. Yeah, Arab. So people have lots of different beliefs over there as they do over here, but the Christians over there believe very similarly to us. So that was a great question, Sheila. Very similarly to us.
Yeah. Wonder if anyone on Facebook have any thoughts or questions or anything around this discussion.
And I was also wondering, y'all, there are a lot of, some of you have heard me before at Christmas time and other times when I've talked about Jesus' birth and all those stories. There are a lot of traditions around them as well that are inaccurate biblically. And some of those may have come to mind for you as well. For example, there's no mention of an innkeeper or a donkey. And for most of our children's plays that we were in, when you have people dress up like the wise men and they go to the manger. Well, the wise men went to a house in Bethlehem to see Mary 2 years later.
The first time we had that discussion, I thought you had lost your mind. I'm like, what?
So it's funny how our traditions today are.
Oh my God!
We think we understand the Bible.
And we're reading the same Bible.
Yeah,
It's like,
but our idea of the Christmas story is not Bible driven.
yeah, I know, and it's like, no, it's there. It has to be there. I've heard this all my life. It has to be there, and it's not.
And then when I started telling you about the katalama and what that word means, and it kind of messes up the whole manger thing.
Yeah.
And a manger is not a shed, and the shed wasn't in the field.
I know, and where Jesus was born, in the house, and the bottom and the trough. I thought, oh my God!
Well, if you could just put December 25th sort of in the same basket with all of those things that we've collected that are not scripturally driven, but are a part of our American and or really Western European traditions.
Yeah.
And a lot of those traditions that we celebrate around Christmas come from various places in Europe where they did have, stables out in fields with wooden mangers, but not in the Middle East in the first century.
Yeah. And we just adopted from one generation to the other. And just adopted all those plays. I mean, I used to write all those plays, man.
I never
Put
will
on a
forget.
whole production.
I will never, ever, ever forget when a woman in the church one time, I read to her the verse that says, the shepherd said, "Let us go into Bethlehem." It's the shepherds who are in the field.
Keeping
He said,
watch.
let us go into Bethlehem. So
And see
we
this
got
thing.
to move Jesus downtown in a manger somewhere downtown, and the shepherds are coming in from the fields to see him downtown. He wasn't born out of town. He was born downtown. And when she saw that, her mouth remained open for, I don't know, it seemed like a year. She was just stunned.
Yeah.
Not offended, kind of excited, but how, how many Christmas cards have you seen with Bethlehem in the distance?
Oh yeah.
And you got a little wooden.
And those star. Don't forget the star of Bethlehem and yep.
They didn't build anything out of wood much back then, especially people who weren't kings. Kings could afford things like cedars from Lebanon, but wood was scarce. Wood was expensive. They built almost everything, including their homes and their mangers. And a manger is a feed trough. It's not a stable. Everything was made of stone. They found, feed troughs. I can show you lots of pictures of them. Animal feed troughs or mangers are all made of soft limestone. You just take a block of limestone and you scoop out, a little place to put the food in.
It might be helpful, Bert, too, for us to do one Bible study, just questions around these kinds of things.
Sure. Sure.
What do you mean there was no manger, or a stable, or, where does it say, it happened 2 years later, or, questions that have come up from time to time.
Sure.
Hearing messages, just to get some clarity.
And I've done the PowerPoints on that at least 2 or 3 times, so I wouldn't have to do that, but I could have it handy just in case I could say go to slide number such and such and show you a picture of it or something. I could do that if someone asks about what does a manger look like in the Bible.
Or questions about anything, Easter, Christmas. Anything that you've always had a thought or some questions about.
Sheila, were you listening? Were you listening into our my sermons last Christmas, or have you is this a recent thing for you?
No, I didn't get to see that last year.
Okay.
No. Yeah, all this is recent, really.
Yeah. Well, I think we should talk about it. I should just we could go through them again. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. What do you want to do, Kia?
I think that's the great idea.
Like to do what?
I enjoyed hearing it before when you spoke about it and incorporated the whole Santa Claus thing.
Yeah, we did that in the summertime in the sanctuary about what, 3 years ago? 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was about three and a half, yes.
Yeah. And then of course I did several of them last Christmas. Sitting right over there in front of that TV. Trying to fight the reflection off that TV and make it all work.
And then the Advent wreath caught on fire.
Yeah, right there.
I remember that.
You remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been a year now.
I made all these bloopers and I put them up on YouTube and they're hilarious. And that's one of my favorite ones is we're sitting there talking and I created a counter on the video going 10, 9, 8, when she notices that it's on fire and she turns and she goes, ooh.
Fire!
And then she says, I quote, the candles are burning. And I'm like, the candles are burning? Of course they are. It's an Advent wreath. But then I turned and I looked. Actually, I saw the reflection in the laptop and I realized there was an entire blaze behind me.
Yep. Our house was caught on fire.
Yeah,
and no one said anything. We were just going along.
No, they were laughing.
Taking
They
prayer
were laughing.
requests.
People were writing ha ha ha. They're putting smiley faces. Like we set the house on fire and melted the corner of the screen, and
the television.
They were like, "Dang, this is better than real TV."
Well, I thought it was a screensaver in the.
No, it was a real fire in our house.
Yeah, we set it on fire. I guess the candle burned down so low that it caught a leaf on fire, and then the whole thing went up.
I just bought a new one. We just replaced it.
We'll try not to burn that one down.
Exactly.
Well, I hope you all have a good night. We're running a little late.
Yeah, we're over time.
we'll see you all on Sunday morning. And let me give you a quick update on something. So we'll be back together again next week with Jean. But on is it the 15th? Wednesday the 15th?
Yes.
Yep, on the following Wednesday night, or Wednesday during the day sometime, Patricia and I are actually going up to Gene's church. We'll be in Tennessee. So we'll be doing something from his church that'll be a joint live event.
Yeah.
We haven't picked a time yet. It'll probably be at his church at his normal 11 o'clock Eastern time, 10 o'clock Central. And then we'll do it together, and then we won't do it at night.
We won't do it at night. We'll just have one Bible
That's probably
study.
what's going to happen, but we'll let you know. We could do it in the evening at our time too, but since we're going over there, it makes more sense, I think, to do it during
At
his
his
regular
time,
time.
yeah.
And his people can come and visit in person, or they can watch on live stream, or they can watch on Zoom. And of course, on our live stream and Zoom, it will be going on at the same time too.
Yes.
So
you
it should
can
be
still
really interesting. And
participate.
Jean will be sitting there with us, and we'll have a sort of a joint crowd together.
Yep.
And you all can see me and G in the same room at the same time, which, would prove that we both are real.
Really? Really? You real?
Last time I checked. We'll have to go check him, though.
Yeah. So we'll keep you posted, though, and let you know the time.
Yes, we
that
will. We'll
do
let you know
that
if there are any changes,
on
but
Wednesday after next.
next Wednesday's the same.
Yeah, we'll
the
be
8th,
back
the
here
8th
next
is the
time.
same, but the following Wednesday, 2 weeks from today, we're probably going to be doing this study at 11 Eastern, 10 Central.
We'll see.
But we'll confirm that with you
Right.
after we talk with Gene again. And we'll be spending the night up at his place.
Yep.
It's going to be great
Yep.
with all his critters.
With the horses.
We're going to go horseback riding, I hope.
Yep. Gene has lots of horses and other cows, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to hurt those. It's going to be too cold.
Deers and whatever else.
Oh, yeah, they got a lot of critters. I
They
hope.
am jealous.
Yeah, well, why don't you drive over there? You're not far. Oh, you're in Louisiana now. I forgot. Shoot.
Yeah.
You used to be in Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
I used to be, yeah.
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 Well, bless y'all. Glad you were here tonight. This recording will be up shortly on
YouTube,
no,
on
I'll have to
Facebook.
load it to YouTube, but it'll be up shortly on Facebook on the Owl Rock group page. Thanks, y'all.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Have a good night.
Okay, say hey to San and JB.
See you soon.
All right, good night.
Will do.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Good
Yeah.
night.
Good night.
Bye, Sheila.
Bye-bye.
Always good to see you. Say hey to your husband.